Hi guys, welcome back to part 2 of Bunnicula. Alright, so where we left off. He showed me his little paw. I couldn't see anything wrong, but I knew better than to argue with him. Oh yes, I said, that looks terrible. You must be suffering awfully. You'd better go easy today. He limped dramatically, just far enough to display his new handicap, and continued. I couldn't even get to the pendulum. Somebody had put glass in front of it, and I was pretty mad. I was all set to go back, but at the same time, I couldn't help watching the thing move back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. It was easy to watch, and before I knew what had happened, I was waking up. You fell asleep? I asked, incredulously. I couldn't help it. I didn't even know it had happened, but I looked up at the face of the clock, and it was 12:45. I'd been gone 45 minutes. I ran back into the living room, looked at Bunnicula's cage, and it was empty. I couldn't imagine where he was. Then I noticed a light coming from under the kitchen door. I went into a crouch, stalking the light, when click, I heard the refrigerator door close, and the light went out. It must have been Mr. Monroe having his midnight snack, I suggested. No, that's what I thought. I jumped on my chair, curled up real quick, and kept one eye open, pretending to be asleep. Slowly the door to the kitchen squeaked open. The little head poked out from around the corner and looked to either side to see if the coast was clear. Then guess who came bouncing out all by himself, and with that idiotic grin of his plastered all over his face? Well, I guess it wasn't Mr. Monroe, I said. Not unless he wears bunny pajamas and gets very tiny at night. Bunnicula, huh? You got it. Unfortunately, I hadn't positioned myself so I could see him and get back into the cage, and I didn't want to let him know that I had seen anything, so I had to stay put. I still don't know how he got out or back in. At this point, Mr. Monroe came downstairs to make breakfast. I wondered if Chester hadn't dreamed the whole thing. He did admit he had fallen asleep, and as I've said, he has quite an imagination. But I was game. After all, there hadn't been any excitement in this place for days. Chester and I took our positions under the kitchen table. We didn't have long to wait. Holy cow, Mr. Monroe yelped as he opened the refrigerator door. He took this funny-looking white thing out of the fridge and held it at his arm's length. Peter, come down here. What is that? I whispered. Beats me, Chester answered. It looks like a white tomato. Very funny, I said as Pete came into the kitchen. Peter, have you been playing with our chemistry set in here? No, Dad, why? I thought this might be one of your experiments. Do you know what it is? Gee, Dad, it looks like a white tomato. Just then, Miss Monroe and Toby came in the door. What's all the fuss about? Miss Monroe said. We were just trying to figure out what this is. Toby pulled it down so he could get a better look. Well, he said, it looks to me like a white tomato. Mr. Monroe took a good look, too. You know, he said to his wife, it really does look like a white tomato. There's one way to find out, said Miss Monroe, who always with the practical one. Let's cut it open and see what's inside. Everyone gathered around the table. I jumped up on a chair. In all excitement, no one noticed I had my paws on the table, which under normal circumstances was discouraged, to say the least. Chester wasn't so lucky. Chester, get off the table, said Mrs. Monroe. Chester jumped onto Toby's shoulder, where he stayed to view the proceedings. Miss Monroe took her sharpest knife and cut cleanly through the thing. It fell into two halves. It's a tomato, all right, said Mrs. Monroe. Here are the seeds. But it's all white, Toby observed. And look, said Pete, it's dry. So it is, says Mr. Monroe, as he picked up one of the halves. There's no juice at all. Well, Anne, what do you think? It's gone bad, I guess. I've never heard of a tomato turning white before. Come on, she said, clearing the table. Let's throw it out and have breakfast. And Harold, get your paws off the table. Rats. Chester jumped down from Toby's shoulder and motioned for me to follow him into the living room. This had better be important, I said. They're cooking bacon. A white tomato, very significant, Chester murmured. So it's a white tomato, I said, edging my way back to the kitchen door. What does that have to do with Bunnicula? I can tell you one thing, Chester said. I've got a good look at that tomato. There were very suspicious marks on the skin. So, I believe they're teeth marks. So tonight I'm going to reread a book I read last year. How fascinating, I said, as the aroma of frying bacon wafted across my nostrils. And what book might that be? The Mark of the Vampire. What? I stopped dead in my tracks. Meet me tonight after the others have gone to sleep. You'd better take a nap today so you can stay awake. Chester closed his eyes. I shifted my look to Bunnicula, who seemed to be asleep in his cage, a tiny smile upon his lips. A happy dream, I wondered, or something else. My reverie was broken by the sound of crunching bacon. I was in the kitchen in a flash. Chapter 4. The Cat Prepares. I almost didn't make it to my meeting with Chester that night. Toby had a feast in his room. It was Friday night, and on Friday nights, Toby gets to stay up and read as late as he wants. So, of course, he needs lots of food to keep up his strength. Good food like cheese crackers, chocolate cupcakes, my very favorite, and the kind with cream in the middle. Pretzels and peanut butter sandwiches. The last I cannot abide because my mouth always gets stuck. Chocolate cupcakes with cream in the center, however, are another story. This particular evening, I stationed myself on Toby's tummy. Usually, I'm a little more subtle. But, having missed out on the baking at breakfast, I was not to take any chances on the chocolate cupcakes with cream in the center. Toby knew what I was after, but sometimes he thinks he's funny and he plays little games with me. Hi, Harold, I bet you'd like a peanut butter sandwich, wouldn't you? Here, you have this one. There's leftovers from yesterday while I eat this boring old chocolate cupcake, which is nice and fresh and has cream in the middle. Okay, Harold, ha. My sides are splitting. What's the matter? Don't you like the peanut butter sandwich? All right, I'll put it away for another night. Oh, there's something you might like. It's a green sour ball from Daddy's candy dish. That was stuck in my sock. Would you like that, huh, pal? Oh boy, this kid is really hot tonight. Nuh-huh. Well, I'll give you one of my cupcakes, but I know how much you hate chocolate. Would a little drooling on your stomach help convince you otherwise? Oh, you like chocolate? Okay then, you can have both of them. One thing I have to say about Toby, although he's got a rotten sense of humor, he's a nice kid. Naturally, once I've eaten both cupcakes, which took approximately 4 seconds, I felt obligated to hang around and let Toby know I was grateful. What better way than to share a few of his cheese crackers? Hey, Harold, Toby said sometime later. We've had quite a party, but now I have to go to sleep. I can't keep my eyes open, so I'll have to wait until tomorrow to find out what happens in the next chapter. This is a good book, Harold. It's called Treasure Island, and it's by a man named Robert Louis Stevenson. It's kind of hard reading, though. I have to keep looking the big words up in the dictionary, so it's taking me a long time to get through it. I've always had trouble with words myself. Half the time, they don't mean what I think they're going to, and then, even when I do find out what they mean, I forget the next day anyway. You might say that I'm smart, but just not the scholarly type. But it's a really good story, Toby continued. It's all about pirates and this little boy just like me. No dogs? And a parrot, Harold. A parrot? What's a parrot? Is there anything about chocolate cake? That's my idea of treasure. Well, good night, Harold. If you're going to sleep here, you'll have to get off my stomach because it's a little full right now. Good night, Toby. I curled up at the foot of the bed, but I couldn't sleep trying to figure out what a parrot was. I thought it might be a lady pirate since the words sounded somewhat alike, but then again, I thought it might be an umbrella. Chester would know, I thought, so I went downstairs to ask him. Well, you certainly took your time, Chester snapped as I sauntered into the room. I finished my book half an hour ago. Where were you? It so happens I was discussing great works of literature with Toby. Since when is a Twinkie wrapper considered a great work of literature? I decided to ignore that. Unfortunately, several chocolate crumbs fell from my mouth to the floor at precisely that moment. As a matter of fact, I said, trying vigilantly to regain my dignity, we were talking about Treasure Island. Ever hear of it? Ever hear of it? He sneered. I read that when I was a kitten. Oh, then tell me, Chester, what is a parrot? Chester looked at me scornfully. A parrot, he said, is a tropical, zoological bird that has a stout, curved, hooked bill, is often crested, brightly... Wow, Chester's got a vocabulary. Variegated and an excellent mimic. In other words, Harold, a parrot is a little bird with a big mouth. Oh, I said for a moment. I thought maybe it was an umbrella. Did you get so busy discussing parrots with Toby you forgot you were going to meet me here? This is important, Harold. I still wasn't sure what a parrot was, but I decided that this was not the time to pursue it. Come over here, Chester commanded, indicating his chair, and let me show you this book. I looked at the chair Chester was already sitting in with a very large book open in front of him. I didn't think there's going to be room for both of us, Chester. I said, come on, you're wasting time. Just jump up here. I surveyed the scene carefully. I knew I'd have to get a running start since there was just a tiny spot left for me, and I would never be able to fit into it if I pulled myself up slowly. Apparently, I was taking too long for Chester's liking. Will you get up here, he hissed. Okay, if that's what you want. I ran and jumped onto the chair, landing with a great curlop. Chester, where are you? I cried. I couldn't see anything but the back of the chair. I'd forgotten to turn myself around. I'm here, you great oaf. I turned my head. What are you doing on the floor? He said, you knocked me off the chair. Now just stay put. I'll come back up. I moved to the back of the chair and Chester landed on the front. Now let's see, he said. We both have to see the book. You come over here and I'll move this way. I don't know if you've ever watched a cat try to decide where to sit, but it involves a lot of circling around, sitting, getting up again, circling some more, thinking about it, lying down, standing up, bathing a paw or a tail, and circling. A dog, on the other hand, sits. This looks like a good spot, a dog would say to himself. He will then lower his body to the spot in question and is usually so secure in his decision that he will fall asleep immediately. Chester took what felt like 20 minutes to settle himself in, and just as I was drifting off, the kicks started. Come on, Harold. Quit hogging the seat. Wake up. What were you trying to do? Take a little cat nap? Ha ha ha. I yawned. Now, said Chester, turning to the book, let's get down to brass tacks. What exactly is on your mind? I asked. This book and that rabbit, Chester replied. Now tell me, Harold, have you noticed anything funny about that rabbit? No, I said, but I've certainly noticed a lot of funny things about you recently. Think about it. That rabbit sleeps all day. So do I. So do you. Furthermore, he's got funny little sharp teeth. So do I. So do you. Furthermore, he gets in and out of his cage by himself. What kind of rabbit can do that? A smart one, I said. I could do it. We're not talking about you, Harold. We're talking about the rabbit. Now, where did they find him? At the movies. Yes, but what movie? Dracula, I said. So, he said quickly, remember that note around his neck? What language was it in? An obscure dialect of the Carpathian mountain region, I answered smugly. He didn't know everything. Aha, Chester said. But what area of the Carpathian mountain region? Area? What's an area? I looked at him blankly. Transylvania, he cried triumphantly. And that proves my point. What point? What are you talking about? And don't forget the white tomato. That's most important. Oh, but what? This book, said Chester, disregarding me, tells us just what we need to know. What? I practically screamed. What does it tell us? What does this book have to do with Bunnicula? What are you talking about? What's going on here? I can't stand it anymore. Chester regarded me coolly. You're really very excitable, Harold. That's not good for your blood pressure. I put my paws around his throat. Tell me, I said in a low, threatening voice, or I'll squeeze you till you pop. Okay, don't get upset. Now this book tells you everything you've always wanted to know about vampires but were afraid to ask. Personally, I had never wanted to know anything about vampires, but at the moment, I was afraid to tell that to Chester. I still don't understand what vampires have to do with our little furry friend. One, Chester said, vampires do not sleep at night. They sleep only during the day. The same holds true for this rabbit. 2, vampires can get in and out of locked rooms. Bunnicula gets in and out of his locked cage. This is beginning to interest me. Didn't you say something about the refrigerator? That's right, he got the refrigerator open all by himself. 3, vampires have long pointed teeth. They're called fangs. Well, don't we have fangs? No, we have canines. That's different. What's different about it? Fangs are more pointed and vampires use fangs to bite people on the neck. Ugh. Who'd want to do that? Vampires would. That's who. Wait a minute. I saw Ms. Monroe bite Mr. Monroe on the neck once. That means she's a vampire. Boy, are you dumb. She's not a vampire. She's a lawyer. She bites necks. I don't think that's quite the same thing. Now, Bunnicula does not bite people on the neck. At least not so far. But he does bite vegetables. On the neck, I asked? Vegetables don't have necks, Harold. Vegetables are like that. It's like dogs. Dogs don't have brains. Dogs are like that. Oh, yeah, I said, but of course he bites vegetables. All rabbits bite vegetables. He bites them, Harold, but he does not eat them. That tomato was all white. What does that mean? It means that he paints vegetables? I ventured. It means he bites vegetables to make a hole in them, and then he sucks out all the juices. But what about all the lettuce and carrots that Toby has been feeding him in his cage? Aha, what indeed, Chester said. Look at this. Whereupon he stuck his paw under the chair cushion and brought out with a flourish an assortment of strange white objects. Some of them looked like unironed handkerchiefs, and the others didn't look like anything he'd ever seen before. What are they? I asked. Chester smiled. Lettuce and carrots, he said. White lettuce and carrots. I found them hidden behind his cage. I was aghast. What did it all mean? Could Chester be right? Was this harmless-looking little ball of fluff really a vampire? Just then Chester let out a yell. Look, he said, the cage is empty again. Oh, we're fools, we're fools. We've let him get out of our sight. It's your fault. My fault? You're the one who took 20 minutes to sit down. Well, if you hadn't knocked me off the chair in the first place. Wait, why are we arguing? Let's find Bunnicula. Just then he heard a click in the kitchen. Refrigerator, I whispered. Chester nodded. We jumped down and moved cautiously to the kitchen door. Shh! Chester warned unnecessarily as we crept along. Don't make any noise. We don't want him to hear us coming. Obviously, I retorted. The light went out under the door. He must have closed the refrigerator, Chester said. Easy now. He pushed the door open. The kitchen was dark. There was not a sound. Psst, Chester. What? I can't see. I can, but I can't see him. He's not here. There was a soft scamper across the linoleum, and we turned just in time to see a little white tail bounce out the door into the living room. Drat, we've missed him. Come on, Harold. Let's see if we can catch up with him. Chester started towards the door. Wait, Chester. What's that on the floor by the refrigerator? We turned. This new object interested him more than following Bunnicula. Watch out, he said. I'll take care of this. He slunk across the room slowly, muscles taut, eyes alert. When he was about 6 inches away, he stuck out his paw, closed his eyes, and batted at the object tentatively. I don't think he made any contact. Get closer, I said. Chester's eyes popped up, and who's the cat here? He asked. I know what I'm doing, and he proceeded to bat the air 3 more times. What is it? I squealed as my throat contracted in fear. I don't know yet, but whatever it is, it's not alive. Oh boy, if I wait for you, we'll be here all night. I walked bravely to the object and sniffed it. Well, asked Chester. Beats me. Chester came closer, and after a moment of close examination, he gasped. I jumped. I could feel my heart pounding in my chest. Harold, Chester blurted. What? What is it, Chester? It's a white zucchini. Chapter 5. Chester goes into his act. The next morning, I was awakened by a scream. Robert, come down here right away. There's something wrong in the kitchen. For a moment, panic seized me. I thought she'd run out of dog food, but then I remembered the events of the previous evening. Mr. Monroe came bounding down the stairs. Chester, I cried. Did you see Mr. Monroe? His face has turned white. It's Bunnicula, isn't it? No, he said calmly. It's shaving cream, you idiot. But now the excitement in the kitchen was at full throttle. The table was covered with Bunnicula's handiwork. There were white beans and white peas and white squash and white tomatoes and white lettuce and white zucchini. What can it mean, Robert? Said Mrs. Monroe. I'm getting worried. 1 tomato is a curiosity, but this is unheard of. There must be something wrong with our refrigerator. That's it, is turning all the vegetables white. But look, she said, I left these tomatoes on the windowsill, and they're white too. And this squash I left in the bowl on the table. At that moment, Pete and Toby came into the kitchen. Holy cow, what's going on? Hey, maybe it's a vegetable blight, Mom. Could that be, Robert? Did you ever hear of anything like that? Well, no, actually, I've heard of blight, but nothing like this. Chester leaned my way. This will take forever if we leave it up to them. Sometimes human beings can be so slow. I started to answer him, but was heading for the table. What about that friend of yours in the agriculture department? Oh, Tom Cragen? Could we call him and ask if we're doing something wrong? Is DDT, Mom? Peter interjected. I know about this stuff. It's because you buy vegetables that aren't organic. All vegetables are organic, Peter, Ms. Monroe replied. That's not what my teacher says. See, Toby, I told you this would happen. They're using chemicals in our food, and if you're not careful, you turn white too. Like Dad? Robert, couldn't you take that shaving cream off your face? Oh, yes, of course. Where's my towel? I know I brought it down here with me. For that matter, where was Chester? I'd seen him going towards the table, but I'd lost track of him listening to all the talk about DDT. I just hoped they didn't use any of that stuff where they grew chocolate cupcakes. Pete, did you take my towel? Why would I take your towel, Dad? I don't shave. Just then the door swung open. I could not believe my eyes. There was Chester, Mr. Monroe's towel draped across his back and tied under his neck like a cape. That was strange enough, but on his face was an expression that sent chills down my spine. His eyes were wide and staring. The corner of his mouth were pulled back to an evil grimace. His teeth were bared and gleaming in the morning light. He cackled immensely, and threw back his head as if he were laughing at all of us. I thought, he's completely lost his mind. There's my towel. What's the matter, Chester? Were you cold? Mr. Monroe bent down to take the towel from Chester. Before he could lay his hands on it, Chester flipped onto his back, closed his eyes, and folded his paws over his chest. It was a hideous sight. He opened his eyes wide. With paws outstretched, he slowly lifted his head, and his eyes glazed and vacant. Soon the upper half of his body followed, all in one smooth move until he was in a sitting position. Hey, Dad, did you leave your brandy glass out last night? Chester's acting a little weird. Well, son, cats are funny creatures. I glanced at Chester. He wasn't laughing. Psh, Chester, what are you up to? I'm a vampire, you dolt. Can't you tell? I'm trying to warn them. Well, it's not working. You better think of something else. Chester frowned, apparently deep in thought. So, you see, Toby, Mr. Monroe was explaining, all cats are individuals as are people. Maybe he just wants to get our attention. Isn't that right, kitty cat? Ordinarily, Chester would have left the room upon being called kitty cat, but he was lost in thought. Come on, Chester, give me back my towel. Mr. Monroe moved towards Chester. Chester's eyes lit up. He looked at me and smiled. I sensed I was not going to like what he had in mind. I was toying with the notion of slinking under the table when Chester fixed me with his eyes. How deep they were, like black pools. I felt myself floating, lost in them, my will no longer my own. I felt an inexplicable urge to murmur, "Yes, master," when he walked slowly, steadily towards me. As he drew nearer, I found myself unable to move. He stopped before me, never taking his gaze from me, and lunged. Meow! Mom, Chester bit Harold on the neck. Aw, that wasn't a real bite, was it, Chester? That was a love bite. Isn't that cute? Love bite? My foot, that hurt. Chester, what's the matter with you? I sputtered. Do I look like a tomato? Oh, it doesn't matter anyway, Harold. They don't understand. How can human beings read the same books I do and still be so thick? Oops. Our conversation was interrupted. Miss Monroe picked Chester up and cuddled him. I was praying she would not add insult to injury by kissing his nose, which she hated more than anything. Poor Chester, do you need a little love? Do you know what I'm going to do, you big ball of fuzz, you? Oh, I can tell what was coming. I'm going to kiss you on your little nose. Yep, I could tell that was coming all right. Chester knew better than to resist. He went limp in Mrs. Monroe's arms. Miss Monroe took his towel off Chester. I still don't know why he's wearing my towel, he said. I think he must be cold, dear. Here's your towel. Why don't you get his kitty sweater? Chester looked ill, and he can wear that all day. As Chester was buttoning into his bright yellow sweater with little purple mice and cowbells all over it, Mr. Monroe said, What about those vegetables? Shall I speak to Tom Cragen? Yes, dear, Miss Monroe said. Why don't you? I'm sure there's some explanation. In the meantime, I'll change markets. To tell you the truth, I'm really much more worried about Chester. We'd better keep an eye on him. Chester and I did not speak until late afternoon when I was busy nursing my neck and Chester was busy hiding under the sofa, too embarrassed to be seen. When we did speak at last, it was a brief exchange. Hey, Chester, I called when we finally crawled out from under bed. We don't have to worry about any vampire bunnies anymore. All you have to do is stand outside his cage in that sweater and he'll laugh himself to death. Chester was not amused. That's right. Make fun of all of you. No one understands. I tried to warn them, and they won't heed. Now, I'm going to take matters into my own hands. Whereupon Chester and his 16 purple mice went into the kitchen for dinner.